Philosophy, as a pursuit of truth, has been shaped and molded by countless thinkers across the ages. Yet few names in this lineage resonate as profoundly as that of Plato, the Athenian philosopher who transformed human thought, laid the foundations of Western philosophy, and articulated a vision of reality that continues to shape discussions of ethics, knowledge, and the human soul even today. To understand the enduring importance of Plato is to step into a world where reason seeks to illuminate the essence of life itself, where questions of justice, virtue, and truth are not merely abstract puzzles but guides to living well. Plato was more than a thinker. He was a bridge between the mythic wisdom of earlier Greece and the rational, analytical tradition that would dominate Western civilization for millennia. Plato's life and works represent one of the great turning points in intellectual history. To the Greeks before him, philosophy was often bound to cosmology and natural speculation. The Milesians wondered about the origin of all things. Heraclitus saw the world in flux. Pythagoras found harmony in numbers. But Plato, inspired by his teacher Socrates, turned the gaze of philosophy inward toward the soul, morality, and the conditions of knowledge. In doing so, he introduced a method of thinking that questioned not just what exists but how we know what exists, and how we should live in light of that knowledge. The life of Plato, from aristocratic Athens to the Academy. Plato was born in Athens around 428 or 427 BCE. During the golden age of the city-state, a period marked by artistic brilliance and democratic energy, but also by social instability and war. His family belonged to the Athenian aristocracy. His father Ariston claimed descent from the early kings of Athens, and his mother Perictione was related to Solon, the legendary lawgiver. Such a lineage meant that young Plato was destined for political life, perhaps even leadership, had his destiny not been reshaped by the encounter with one man, Socrates. Athens in Plato's youth was a city in turmoil. The Peloponnesian War between Athens and Sparta ravaged the Greek world, draining resources, fracturing alliances, and sowing disillusionment with the democratic system that had once been the pride of the Athenians. It was in this climate that Plato met Socrates, a man who questioned everything: the gods, the politicians, and even the citizens' understanding of virtue. Plato, like many young men of his generation, fell under Socrates' spell. He abandoned the world of poetry and politics to follow his teacher in the streets and marketplaces of Athens, where dialogue became a sacred art of inquiry. The trial and execution of Socrates in 399 BCE marked a profound turning point in Plato's life. To Plato, the death of his mentor was not just a personal tragedy but a moral indictment of Athenian democracy itself. How could a society that prided itself on freedom condemn the wisest and most virtuous man in Athens? This event planted the seed of Plato's lifelong suspicion of democratic politics and his conviction that wisdom, not popular opinion, should guide governance. It also inspired him to record Socrates' words and preserve his legacy, giving rise to a body of work that continues to define philosophy. After Socrates' death, Plato traveled widely to Egypt, Italy, and possibly as far as North Africa and the Near East, seeking knowledge from priests, mathematicians, and philosophers of other lands. In southern Italy, he encountered the Pythagoreans, whose belief in the harmony of numbers and the immortality of the soul left a deep mark on him. Returning to Athens around 387 BCE, he founded the Academy, one of the earliest institutions of higher learning in the Western world. The Academy was not merely a school. It was a community of thinkers devoted to the pursuit of truth through reason. Mathematics, astronomy, ethics, and politics were all taught there, unified by the idea that philosophy could lead the human mind from ignorance to understanding. Plato remained the guiding spirit of the Academy until his death in 347 BCE. His influence, however, far outlived him. Through his dialogues, works such as the Republic, the Symposium, Phaedo, and Timaeus, he created not just a record of Socratic thought but a new philosophical language. His writings, both literary and conceptual, stand at the intersection of art and intellect, dialogues between reason and myth, between the human and the divine. Plato's vision of reality, the theory of forms. At the heart of Plato's philosophy lies one of his most famous and influential ideas, the theory of forms, or ideas. From the Greek eidos, this theory asserts that beyond the world of sensory experience, the world of things we see, touch, and use, there exists a higher, eternal realm of perfect, unchanging realities. These forms are not physical objects but archetypes or essences that give meaning and structure to everything that exists. Consider, for example, a circle. Every circle drawn on paper is imperfect, the line wavers, the shape is imprecise, yet we can still recognize all of them as circles because we possess an understanding of circularity itself, an ideal form of which every material circle is merely a shadow. The same applies to abstract concepts like beauty, justice, and goodness. All beautiful things share in the form of beauty, yet no single beautiful object is beauty itself. This distinction between the world of appearances, the realm of becoming, and the world of forms, the realm of being, underpins much of Plato's philosophy. In Plato's view, the physical world is not the ultimate reality, it is a reflection or imitation of a higher truth. Our senses, while useful, can deceive us, showing us only the changing surface of things. True knowledge, episteme, is achieved not through observation but through reason and dialectic. The disciplined process of questioning and analysis that allows the soul to ascend from the shadows of illusion to the light of understanding. The Allegory of the Cave, one of the most famous passages in the Republic, beautifully illustrates this vision. Plato describes prisoners chained inside a dark cave, facing a wall upon which shadows of objects are projected by firelight behind them. The prisoners, never having seen the actual objects or the outside world, mistake these shadows for reality. If one prisoner is freed and steps into the sunlight, he is at first blinded, but gradually perceives the true world, realizing that the shadows were mere illusions. When he returns to the cave to enlighten the others, they reject him, unable to comprehend a reality beyond their narrow experience. This allegory serves as a metaphor for human ignorance and enlightenment. The cave represents the world of sensory experience. The shadows represent appearances, and the journey upward symbolizes the soul's ascent through reason toward the knowledge of the forms, ultimately culminating in the vision of the form of the good, the supreme source of truth and reality. Just as the sun illuminates the physical world, the good illuminates the intelligible world, giving being and meaning to all other forms. In modern terms, Plato's theory suggests that truth and value are not relative to perception or culture but grounded in objective realities accessible through intellectual and moral development. In an age of skepticism and relativism, this belief in eternal truths remains one of Plato's most radical and inspiring legacies. Plato's epistemology, knowledge, opinion, and the soul's recollection. Plato's distinction between the visible world and the world of forms leads naturally to his theory of knowledge. In dialogues such as Meno and Phaedo, he argues that genuine knowledge is not about sensory data or empirical observation but about understanding immutable truths. This insight gives rise to his concept of anamnesis, or recollection. According to this view, the human soul, being immortal, has already seen the world of forms before its incarnation in the body. Learning, therefore, is not the acquisition of new information but the recollection of truths that the soul once knew. This doctrine of recollection connects closely with Plato's conception of the soul. He divides the human being into two main parts, the body, which belongs to the world of change and decay, and the soul, which belongs to the world of being and truth. The body is subject to illusion, desire, and mortality. The soul, by contrast, is rational, immortal, and divine. Knowledge is achieved when the soul turns away from the distractions of the senses and contemplates the eternal forms. In this way, philosophy becomes a kind of spiritual discipline, a purification of the mind that prepares it for the vision of truth. In the Phaedrus, Plato uses the image of a charioteer and two horses to describe the soul's struggle. The charioteer represents reason, while the two horses symbolize the noble and ignoble aspects of desire. The task of the philosopher is to guide the soul upward, harnessing the passions toward the contemplation of beauty and truth. The pursuit of knowledge is not a cold intellectual exercise but a form of love, the love of wisdom, philosophia, that unites the rational and emotional dimensions of human nature. From this standpoint, ignorance is not merely a lack of information, it is a kind of moral blindness. A captivity of the soul in the world of appearances. To know the good is to become good. For true understanding transforms character. This unity of knowledge and virtue became one of the cornerstones of Western ethics. Plato's ethics and the idea of virtue. For Plato, ethics is inseparable from metaphysics and epistemology, since reality is ordered by eternal forms, and the good is the highest of these. Moral life consists in aligning oneself with that order. Virtue, arete, is therefore a kind of harmony, both within the soul and between the individual and the cosmos. Just as a well-tuned lyre produces beautiful music when each string is in balance. A virtuous soul achieves excellence when reason governs spirit and appetite in proper proportion. In the Republic, Plato identifies 4 cardinal virtues. Wisdom, which belongs to reason. Courage, which belongs to the spirited part of the soul. Temperance, which ensures harmony among all parts. And justice, which arises when each part performs its proper function. Justice, in this sense, is not merely a social concept but an inner harmony. A just person is one whose rational part rules wisely, whose spirited part supports that rule with courage, and whose appetites obey in moderation. This tripartite model of the soul mirrors Plato's vision of the ideal state, in which rulers, the wise, guardians, the courageous, and producers, the workers, cooperate for the common good. Plato thus grounds morality not in arbitrary rules or divine commands but in the very structure of human nature and the universe. To live justly is to live according to reason, and thereby to participate in the divine order of being. This conception of virtue as harmony, balance, and rational self-mastery has profoundly influenced ethical thought from Aristotle to the Stoics to modern virtue ethics. Who was the philosopher Plato? What were his main teachings, and how can his philosophy be applied to modern human life? The vision of justice that Plato articulates in his moral philosophy finds its most elaborate and influential expression in his masterpiece, The Republic. Written in the form of a dialogue, with Socrates as the principal speaker, The Republic is not merely a political treatise but an exploration of the human condition, the nature of justice, and the structure of reality itself. Plato constructs an imaginary city, the Callipolis, as a metaphor for the soul. And through this imaginative exercise he seeks to answer one of the most enduring questions in human thought. What is justice? And why should we be just? The Republic. Justice in the soul and in the state. Plato begins with the premise that justice in society mirrors justice in the individual. Just as the human soul consists of 3 parts, reason, spirit, and appetite, so too does the ideal city consist of 3 corresponding classes. 1. The rulers, or philosopher-kings, who possess wisdom and govern through knowledge of the good. 2. The guardians, or auxiliaries, who embody courage and protect the state. 3. The producers, or craftsmen and farmers, who provide for society's material needs. In this structure, justice arises when each class performs its proper function in harmony with the others, guided by reason and the pursuit of the common good. Injustice, by contrast, occurs when one part of the soul or one class of society usurps the role of another, when appetite rules reason, or when greed overcomes wisdom. Plato's ideal state is thus an aristocracy of virtue, not of birth or wealth. The philosopher-king is not chosen by inheritance or election but by education and merit. Having ascended through a long process of intellectual and moral training, this rigorous system, described in books V and 7 of the Republic, culminates in the philosopher's contemplation of the form of the good, the ultimate truth that enables just governance. For Plato, only those who know what is truly good can rule justly, for they see the whole order of reality and act not for personal gain but for universal harmony. This ideal of the philosopher-king has been both admired and criticized for over 2 millennia. Critics such as Karl Popper, in The Open Society and Its Enemies, saw in it the seeds of totalitarianism, a society ruled by an elite claiming exclusive access to truth. Yet Plato's deeper message is not one of political domination but of moral responsibility. Leadership, in his view, is a sacred trust that demands wisdom, self-control, and love of truth, a society led by those who pursue knowledge and virtue, rather than power and wealth. would embody the highest form of justice. The Allegory of the Cave and the Philosopher-King. The famous Allegory of the Cave, discussed earlier, is central to Plato's understanding of political leadership. The philosopher who escapes the cave and beholds the sun, the form of the good, must not remain in contemplation but return to the cave to guide others toward enlightenment. This represents the ethical duty of the philosopher, to apply wisdom in the service of humanity. Plato's philosopher-king is therefore not a detached intellectual but a moral educator. A guardian of the soul of the state, his knowledge of the good enables him to harmonize conflicting desires, maintain justice, and lead society toward truth. The allegory reminds us that education and leadership are inseparable. Those who have ascended to understanding must use their insight to elevate others. In modern terms, this idea speaks to the responsibility of knowledge. Intellectual or political power, without wisdom and virtue, leads to corruption and tyranny. But when knowledge is united with ethical purpose, it becomes a force for liberation. Plato's vision thus remains a timeless warning. The health of a society depends not on its wealth or technology, but on the moral and intellectual quality of its leaders. Education and the ascent of the soul. Plato's emphasis on education in the Republic reflects his belief that the human soul can be transformed through proper cultivation. Education, for him, is not merely vocational training or the accumulation of information. It is a process of turning the soul toward the light. The Greek word paideia, which Plato often uses, signifies the holistic formation of character, intellect, and virtue. In his ideal state, education is designed to harmonize the different parts of the soul and prepare individuals for their appropriate roles in society. The early stages involve music and gymnastics, which shape the moral and physical nature of the child. Music, in the Greek sense, includes poetry, rhythm, and harmony, all of which nurture the spirit and instill a sense of order and beauty. Gymnastics, on the other hand, strengthen the body and cultivate discipline. As the student matures, he or she undergoes mathematical and philosophical training, leading ultimately to dialectic, the highest form of intellectual inquiry. Through dialectic, the soul learns to move beyond opinion, doxa, to true knowledge, episteme, ascending step by step toward the vision of the good. This ascent is both intellectual and spiritual, for to know the good is to love it and to align one's life with it. Plato's educational philosophy thus anticipates many modern ideas: the integration of physical, moral, and intellectual development, the belief that learning transforms the whole person, and the conviction that education should serve the cultivation of virtue, not merely economic or political ends. His vision challenges the contemporary tendency to treat education as a means to material success, reminding us that its ultimate goal is wisdom and self-knowledge. Plato's theory of love, the ladder of beauty. One of the most profound and human dimensions of Plato's thought appears in his dialogue The Symposium, where he explores the nature of love, eros. Far from being a mere emotion or passion, love for Plato is a spiritual force that propels the soul toward the divine. In the dialogue, the priestess Diotima describes to Socrates the ladder of love, a metaphor for the ascent from physical desire to the contemplation of absolute beauty. The journey begins with the attraction to a single beautiful body. From there, the lover learns to appreciate the beauty in all bodies, then in beautiful souls, and finally in beautiful laws and institutions. Beyond these lies the recognition of beauty in all knowledge and ultimately, the vision of beauty itself, the eternal, unchanging form that gives meaning to all manifestations of beauty in the world. This progression mirrors the soul's ascent from the material to the spiritual. Love, in this sense, is a kind of divine madness, an inspired longing for immortality and perfection. It bridges the gap between the human and the divine, drawing the soul upward through desire for the eternal. Plato's philosophy of love thus transcends the boundaries of erotic or romantic passion. It offers a vision of love as education, a path of transformation that begins with the senses but culminates in the intellect and the soul. In modern human life, this Platonic understanding of love as the pursuit of higher values remains deeply resonant. It teaches that genuine love is not about possession but about growth. Not about consuming beauty but about becoming beautiful through contact with truth. Plato's political realism, the decline of states. While the Republic presents an ideal vision of the just state, Plato was not blind to the flaws and fragility of human institutions. In Book 8, he offers a penetrating analysis of political degeneration, describing how ideal states decline through successive stages, from aristocracy, rule by the wise, to timocracy, rule by the ambitious, to oligarchy, rule by the wealthy, to democracy, rule by the many, and finally to tyranny, rule by the one. Each stage, Plato suggests, arises from the corruption of virtue. The love of wisdom gives way to the love of honor. Honor yields to the love of money, and money worship degenerates into the chaotic pursuit of freedom. When freedom becomes license, when every desire demands satisfaction, the result is anarchy. And from anarchy emerges tyranny, as people seek security in the rule of a strongman. This cyclical vision of political decay reflects Plato's deep understanding of human psychology. Every political system, he implies, mirrors the moral state of its citizens. The just society can only exist where souls are just. The corruption of the state begins in the corruption of the individual. In this sense, Plato's political realism anticipates the insights of modern thinkers from Machiavelli to Tocqueville and reminds us that politics is a reflection of character. The later dialogues, Cosmology and the Divine Order. In his later works, particularly Timaeus and Laws, Plato turned his attention to the cosmos and divine reason. In Timaeus, he presents a vision of the universe as the product of a demiurge, a divine craftsman who shapes matter according to the eternal forms. The cosmos, though imperfect, reflects rational order and purpose. It is a living being endowed with soul and intelligence. This synthesis of metaphysics and cosmology laid the groundwork for later philosophical and theological systems, including those of Aristotle, Plotinus, and the Christian Neoplatonists. In the Laws, Plato adopts a more practical and moderate tone. Having grown older, he recognizes that the philosopher-king may be an ideal seldom realized in practice. Instead, he designs a second-best constitution, one governed by laws inspired by reason but adapted to human weakness. The goal remains the same: to create a society in which virtue and wisdom guide human life. Yet Plato's realism acknowledges that laws, institutions, and education must work together to sustain moral order. Even in this late work, his faith in the transformative power of philosophy remains undiminished. Plato's influence on Western thought. Few thinkers have exercised an influence as vast and enduring as Plato. His ideas shaped not only philosophy but also theology, science, art, and political theory for over 2,000 years. The Neoplatonists of late antiquity, such as Plotinus and Proclus, elaborated his metaphysical doctrines into a grand vision of reality as a hierarchy of being emanating from the One, an idea that profoundly influenced early Christian thinkers like Augustine. During the Middle Ages, Plato's notion of the eternal forms was reinterpreted through the lens of Christian theology. Where the forms became divine ideas in the mind of God, the Renaissance witnessed a revival of Platonic thought through figures like Marsilio Ficino, who translated Plato's works into Latin and promoted the harmony of Platonic philosophy with Christian spirituality. Even in the modern age, the echoes of Plato resound. His emphasis on reason as the path to truth inspired the rationalist tradition of Descartes and Kant. His vision of an intelligible order underlying the world influenced the development of modern science. His idea that education should cultivate virtue and wisdom remains a cornerstone of liberal education. Perhaps most profoundly, Plato's insistence that reality is more than what appears, that there exists a deeper truth accessible to the mind, continues to animate the human quest for meaning. Whether in metaphysics, ethics, or political philosophy, the questions Plato raised remain our own. What is justice? What is truth? What is the good life? Every generation returns to these questions, and in doing so, they return to Plato. Who is the philosopher Plato? What were his main teachings, and how can his philosophy be applied to modern human life? Philosophy, for Plato, was never a mere intellectual exercise. It was a way of life, a continual effort to purify the soul, to align one's actions with truth, and to bring order to both the self and the world. Though more than 2 millennia have passed since his death, Plato's insights remain astonishingly relevant to modern human existence. The rapid transformations of the 21st century, technological innovation, political instability, moral relativism, and the crisis of meaning, echo many of the very problems Plato confronted in his own age of cultural upheaval. To apply his philosophy to our time is not to retreat into ancient abstraction but to rediscover the foundations of wisdom in an age that often confuses information with understanding. The Platonic view of the self in modern psychology. One of Plato's most enduring contributions is his conception of the tripartite soul. He divided the human psyche into three parts. Reason, logistikon, which seeks truth and governs through knowledge. Spirit, thumos, which manifests as courage, ambition, and willpower. Appetite, epithumia, which embodies desire for physical pleasures and material needs. In Plato's analogy, reason must rule, spirit must support it, and appetite must obey. When this internal hierarchy is maintained, the soul is just. When it is disturbed, the individual becomes enslaved by passion, greed, or anger. Modern psychology, though couched in scientific language, often echoes this insight. The division between rational thought, emotional impulse, and instinctive drive parallels Freud's model of the ego, superego, and id. Cognitive behavioral therapy, mindfulness, and emotional intelligence training all aim to achieve what Plato would call the harmony of the soul, a state in which thought, feeling, and desire are integrated rather than in conflict. In our time of psychological stress and moral confusion, Plato's lesson is simple yet profound. Self-mastery is the foundation of freedom. To be ruled by passion is to be enslaved. To govern one's impulses by reason is to attain inner peace. His teaching encourages modern individuals to cultivate reflective awareness, to question the motives behind their desires, and to orient their lives toward enduring values rather than transient pleasures. The Platonic soul thus remains a living model for personal development. It teaches that balance, not suppression, is the key to well-being. When reason governs gently, spirit acts nobly, and desire serves constructive ends, the individual achieves what ancient philosophers called eudaimonia, a flourishing life. 2. The pursuit of knowledge in the information age. Plato's distinction between knowledge, episteme, and opinion, doxa, has never been more relevant than in today's world of instant information. Modern society, saturated with data, often mistakes the abundance of facts for wisdom. Social media and mass communication create a sea of opinions. Yet few possess the disciplined understanding that Plato regarded as true knowledge. In the Republic, Socrates warns against confusing the shadows on the cave wall with reality, a metaphor that resonates eerily in the digital era, where people often live within algorithmic echo chambers that reflect their own biases. The challenge of distinguishing truth from illusion is as urgent now as it was in ancient Athens. Plato's method of dialectic, critical questioning, reasoned dialogue, and the testing of assumptions, offers a timeless antidote to misinformation and superficial thinking. To apply Platonic philosophy to modern intellectual life means to recover the art of thinking well. It requires humility, patience, and the courage to admit ignorance, the very virtues Socrates embodied. In education, it means encouraging inquiry over memorization, and wisdom over mere technical skill. In the age of artificial intelligence and automation, Plato would remind us that knowledge without moral grounding is dangerous, that the goal of learning is not power, but understanding. For teachers, students, and lifelong learners alike, Plato's message remains clear: the pursuit of truth is a moral act. It purifies the soul, ennobles the mind, and connects the human being to the eternal order of reason. 3. Ethics, virtue, and the crisis of modern values. Modern human life is marked by ethical pluralism and moral uncertainty. The decline of traditional belief systems and the rise of cultural relativism have led many to question whether universal moral standards still exist. Plato's philosophy speaks directly to this dilemma. For him, moral truth is not subjective but grounded in the form of the good, an objective standard that transcends opinion and circumstance. In a world where right and wrong are often reduced to personal preference or social consensus, Plato's belief in eternal values challenges us to think more deeply. He would ask, If justice, beauty, and goodness have no objective reality, on what basis can society stand? His answer is that ethical life must be founded on the recognition of the good as the ultimate reality, the principle that orders both the cosmos and the soul. This idea can transform contemporary ethical discourse. Whether in business, politics, or personal relationships, Plato's framework demands that action be measured not by convenience or popularity but by alignment with truth and virtue. A just leader acts not to satisfy the crowd but to serve the common good. A good person does not follow rules mechanically but understands why justice is good in itself. For the modern world, often driven by materialism and moral compromise, the Platonic conception of virtue offers a way back to moral clarity. It calls for self-examination, reasoned reflection, and the cultivation of inner excellence. Virtue, as Plato taught, is not something imposed from outside but a state of harmony within, attainable through discipline and love of truth. 4. Plato's political vision and modern governance. While Plato's ideal of the philosopher-king may seem distant from modern democracy, his political philosophy continues to illuminate the challenges of governance in the 21st century. At its core, his message is that knowledge and virtue must guide political power. Without wisdom, democracy degenerates into demagoguery. Without justice, freedom becomes chaos. In an age of populism, partisanship, and the erosion of civic trust, Plato's warning in the Republic rings prophetic. He observed that democracies, in their passion for freedom, often slide into disorder when citizens pursue private interests over the common good. The desire for equality, unrestrained by virtue, can lead to envy and factionalism, and from such chaos arises the tyrant, promising order while extinguishing liberty. To apply Plato's political insight today is not to abandon democracy but to ennoble it. The solution lies in the cultivation of educated, virtuous citizens, individuals capable of self-government because they have learned to govern themselves. Civic education, critical thinking, and moral responsibility are the foundations of any free society. Plato would remind us that political reform begins in the soul. A nation cannot be just unless its people are. In this sense, the modern equivalent of the philosopher-king is not a ruler but a citizen philosopher, someone who seeks truth, acts justly, and participates in public life with wisdom and integrity. Each person, Plato would argue, must become a guardian of the good within their sphere of influence. 5. The Platonic ideal in education. Education, as Plato conceived it, is the art of turning the soul toward the light. This metaphor remains a powerful image for modern educators. In an age where learning is often measured by test scores, degrees, and job placement, Plato's philosophy reminds us that the true purpose of education is the cultivation of wisdom and character. The modern world, obsessed with specialization, risks producing brilliant technicians who lack moral vision. Plato's educational ideal, a balance of intellectual, moral, and aesthetic development, offers a corrective. It insists that education must aim not only at producing skilled workers but at forming good human beings. A contemporary application of this ideal would emphasize the integration of philosophy, ethics, and the humanities into every field of study. Scientists, engineers, and entrepreneurs alike must grapple with the ethical implications of their work. In this way, Plato's influence can guide the renewal of education for a technological age, ensuring that knowledge serves the good of humanity rather than mere profit. The modern teacher, like the Platonic philosopher, is not simply a transmitter of facts but a midwife of the mind, one who helps students give birth to understanding through questioning and reflection. Education, then, becomes an act of liberation, leading the student from the shadows of ignorance to the light of truth. 6. Plato's relevance to modern love and relationships. In the Symposium, Plato described love as a ladder of ascent, a movement from the love of bodies to the love of souls, and ultimately to the love of beauty itself. This vision has profound implications for modern relationships, often dominated by physical desire, emotional instability, and the commodification of intimacy. To love, in the Platonic sense, is to see in another person a reflection of the divine. True love seeks not possession but mutual elevation, the awakening of virtue and understanding in both partners. Such love transforms desire into creativity, selfishness into generosity, and passion into spiritual companionship. In a time when relationships are often fleeting and transactional, Plato's ideal of love offers a countercultural message that affection rooted in shared pursuit of the good can bring lasting fulfillment. Modern psychology has confirmed what Plato intuited long ago, that deep connection arises not from physical attraction alone but from shared values, growth, and purpose. Thus, Platonic love is not lovelessness but the highest form of love, one that transcends the body and unites souls in the contemplation of truth. 7. The Platonic conception of beauty in art. For Plato, beauty was not merely aesthetic but metaphysical, a manifestation of order, harmony, and truth. In the Phaedrus and Symposium, beauty serves as the visible expression of the divine, the bridge between sense and intellect. When the soul encounters beauty, it is reminded of the eternal realm it once knew. Thus, beauty has the power to awaken the longing for truth. This idea carries great significance for modern art and culture. In a world saturated with images and entertainment, much of which appeals to base emotions, Plato's view invites a re-evaluation of art's moral and spiritual role. He warned in the Republic that art divorced from truth can corrupt the soul by glorifying illusion and passion. Yet he also acknowledged that art guided by reason and virtue can uplift the spirit and reveal the divine. The modern artist, then, bears a responsibility akin to that of the philosopher, to reveal reality through beauty. Whether in literature, film, architecture, or music, the Platonic tradition challenges creators to seek not only aesthetic pleasure but meaning, not only form but essence. Beauty, truth, and goodness, in Plato's vision, are inseparable. To experience one rightly is to approach all three. 8. Plato and the search for meaning in a secular age. Modern human beings live in a paradoxical condition, surrounded by technological power and material abundance, yet haunted by a sense of emptiness. The decline of traditional religion and the fragmentation of values have created what philosophers call a crisis of meaning. Plato's thought, though born in a pagan world, offers a profound answer to this crisis. For Plato, the meaning of life lies in the ascent of the soul toward the good, the realization of its divine nature through knowledge and virtue. This journey gives coherence to human existence, connecting daily actions to cosmic purpose. In contrast to modern existentialist despair, Plato affirms that the universe is intelligible, ordered, and infused with moral significance. His philosophy invites us to rediscover the sacred dimension of reason, not as dogma but as the recognition that truth, beauty, and goodness are real and worth striving for. In a world that often prizes utility over wisdom, Plato reminds us that the highest fulfillment comes not from consumption or status but from the contemplation of what is eternal. Applied to modern life, this means living intentionally, orienting one's work, relationships, and choices toward ideals that transcend the self. In this sense, every person can become a philosopher, living in the light rather than the shadows. Who was the philosopher Plato? What were his main teachings, and how can his philosophy be applied to modern human life? The enduring power of Plato's philosophy lies in its capacity to speak across ages. It offers a vision of the world that is at once rational and spiritual, realistic and transcendent. In a time when many societies struggle to reconcile technological progress with ethical responsibility, Plato's synthesis of knowledge and virtue provides a compass for modern humanity. He teaches that wisdom is not the possession of information but the alignment of the mind and soul with truth. As the 21st century confronts crises of politics, ecology, and meaning, the ancient Athenians' voice sounds with renewed urgency. 1. Plato and modern science, reason, mathematics, and the order of nature. Plato's insistence on the intelligibility of the universe helped to lay the conceptual groundwork for modern science. His belief that reality is structured by rational forms inspired later thinkers such as Kepler, Galileo, and Newton, who saw mathematics as the language of nature. The inscription said to have adorned the entrance to Plato's academy, "Let no one ignorant of geometry enter here," captures his conviction that understanding the cosmos requires intellectual discipline and harmony. In Timaeus, Plato described the cosmos as a living organism crafted by a divine demiurge, who imposes order on chaotic matter through numerical proportion. Though modern science no longer appeals to a divine craftsman, it retains the Platonic faith that the universe is lawful, elegant, and comprehensible. Every equation that reveals a hidden symmetry, every scientific model that unites diverse phenomena, echoes Plato's conviction that beauty and truth coincide. At the same time, Plato would remind modern scientists that reason without moral orientation is incomplete. Knowledge, detached from wisdom, can become destructive. The pursuit of truth must therefore be joined with the pursuit of the good, an insight increasingly vital as humanity wields powers once attributed to the gods: genetic engineering, artificial intelligence, and nuclear energy. To apply Plato's teaching is to ask not only what can we do, but what should we do? The scientist, like the philosopher-king, bears responsibility for the ethical use of knowledge. 2. Technology and the cave revisited. If Plato could step into the digital age, he might recognize in the glow of our screens a new form of the cave allegory. Billions of people now spend hours gazing at luminous surfaces, mistaking virtual shadows for reality. Social media, advertising, and algorithmic curation construct worlds of appearance that captivate the senses but seldom enlighten the soul. Plato's parable thus gains fresh relevance. The task of the modern philosopher, or any thoughtful person, is to turn from illusion toward truth. This does not mean rejecting technology, but using it wisely. Digital media can either imprison or liberate the mind depending on whether it serves curiosity or vanity. In Plato's terms, the question is whether our tools help the soul ascend toward understanding or chain it more tightly to the wall of appearances. A Platonic approach to technology calls for digital virtue, moderation, reflection, and purposeful engagement. It asks individuals to cultivate inner freedom amid distraction, to use reason as the charioteer guiding the horses of curiosity and desire. In this way, the ancient philosophy of the cave becomes a manual for digital citizenship. 3. Environmental ethics and the harmony of the cosmos. Plato's cosmology, particularly in Timaeus, portrays the universe as a single living being whose parts exist in dynamic harmony. Humanity, as part of this cosmic organism, bears responsibility for maintaining balance within it. This vision offers a profound ecological lesson for the modern world, facing climate change and environmental degradation. Unlike the mechanistic view of nature as inert matter to be exploited, the Platonic cosmos is ensouled and purposeful. The order of the heavens mirrors the order of the soul. To live virtuously is to live in tune with nature's rhythms. When human appetite overwhelms reason, when desire for consumption dominates moral awareness, both soul and planet fall into disharmony. Applying Plato's teaching today means reviving a sense of cosmic citizenship. Environmental stewardship is not merely a pragmatic duty but a philosophical one. To respect the order and beauty of the world as reflections of the good. Sustainable living thus becomes a moral and spiritual practice, restoring harmony between the human microcosm and the universal macrocosm. 4. Global ethics and the idea of the good. Plato's conception of the form of the good transcends culture, religion, and era. In a globalized world torn by moral relativism and cultural conflict, it offers a universal anchor for ethical reflection. While societies may differ in customs and beliefs, the aspiration toward goodness, justice, and truth is common to all rational beings. In international relations, economics, and global governance, Plato's principle implies that decisions should be guided by what promotes the flourishing of the whole rather than the advantage of the few. The philosopher-king becomes, in modern terms, the philosopher-citizen of the world, one who recognizes the unity of humanity under the light of reason. Such a vision anticipates contemporary movements for human rights and global cooperation. Yet Plato would caution that institutions alone cannot secure justice. Only the cultivation of virtue in individuals can. The United Nations, for instance, can declare principles, but unless citizens and leaders embody wisdom and moderation, the ideals remain shadows. Thus, global peace depends ultimately on the education of the soul. 5. The Platonic legacy in art, literature, and culture. Throughout history, Artists have turned to Plato for inspiration because he treats beauty as a path to truth. From Dante's celestial ascent in the Divine Comedy to Goethe's romantic idealism. From the Renaissance painters who sought mathematical proportion to modern filmmakers exploring illusion and reality. Platonic themes pervade cultural expression. In today's creative industries, the tension between art as entertainment and art as enlightenment continues. Plato's critique of imitation in the Republic often shocks modern sensibilities. Yet his deeper point remains instructive. Art possesses moral power. It shapes imagination, molds emotion, and influences behavior. To apply his thought in the arts is to pursue authenticity, depth, and moral clarity, to create works that awaken rather than anesthetize the human spirit. Even popular culture reflects Platonic echoes. Films such as The Matrix dramatize the cave allegory. Science fiction explores the nature of reality and the search for truth. Each retelling of these themes testifies to the timelessness of Plato's insight that awakening from illusion is the essence of liberation. 6. The relevance of Plato's educational vision. As education systems around the world confront challenges of inequality, automation, and cultural fragmentation, Plato's concept of paideia offers a holistic alternative. He understood education not as the filling of a vessel but the turning of the soul. This transformation requires a community devoted to inquiry and virtue, what the academy once embodied. Modern universities, pressured by economic demands, often prioritize employability over enlightenment. Plato would argue that such institutions risk losing their purpose if they cease to cultivate wisdom. Integrating philosophy, ethics, and the arts with science and technology can restore balance, producing citizens capable of thoughtful judgment. Moreover, Plato's dialectical method, respectful dialogue aimed at truth, can renew civic discourse. In polarized societies, learning to question without hostility, to reason together rather than shout apart, is urgently needed. The Socratic conversation remains a model for democratic education in its highest sense. 7. Individual flourishing, the art of living well. At the heart of all Plato's dialogues lies a single question: how should one live? For him, the good life is not defined by wealth or pleasure but by harmony of the soul and participation in truth. This concept offers a counterpoint to the modern cult of productivity and consumption. To live platonically in the modern world means cultivating inner order amid external chaos. It means practicing self-examination, the daily dialogue with oneself that Socrates called the care of the soul. It means viewing every action through the lens of virtue. Does this choice lead me closer to wisdom, courage, temperance, and justice? If so, it aligns with the good. Such a life need not withdraw from society, rather, it transforms ordinary activities, work, friendship, citizenship, into expressions of philosophical integrity. The modern individual, surrounded by distractions, can find serenity through contemplation and service, realizing that happiness follows from excellence of character, not from possession of things. 8. Plato's dialogue with modern philosophies. Even those who rebelled against Plato often did so in conversation with him. Aristotle, his greatest student, criticized the separation of forms but retained the pursuit of rational order. Descartes and Kant transformed his metaphysics into epistemology. Nietzsche and Heidegger challenged his idealism but could not escape his shadow. In psychology, Jung's archetypes echo the forms as patterns of the collective unconscious. In political thought, debates about elitism, justice, and democracy still revolve around Platonic ideas. Engaging with these later developments reveals Plato's enduring relevance. His questions, more than his answers, continue to shape human self-understanding. The philosopher who wrote in dialogues would have welcomed this ongoing conversation. For dialectic thrives in disagreement pursued with reason. 9. The spiritual dimension. Plato and the quest for transcendence. Beyond logic and politics, Plato's philosophy possesses a mystical undercurrent. His belief in the immortality of the soul and the reality of the good gives life a transcendent horizon. In Phaedo, Socrates faces death with serenity, convinced that the philosopher's task is to prepare for the soul's release from the body. Whether one interprets this literally or symbolically, it expresses faith that truth and goodness are not destroyed by mortality. For modern humanity, often anxious about death and purposelessness. This vision offers consolation. To live philosophically is to participate in eternity through understanding and virtue. The good, though unseen, is accessible through love, reason, and beauty. Thus, even in a secular context, Plato provides a language for spiritual aspiration, a way to affirm meaning beyond material existence. 10. The continuing relevance of Plato's method. Perhaps Plato's greatest gift is not a set of doctrines but a method of inquiry. The Socratic dialogue teaches that wisdom begins in humility, the recognition of one's ignorance. In an age dominated by certainty and ideology, this humility is revolutionary. It opens the path to genuine communication and progress. To apply Plato's method today means cultivating intellectual courage, the willingness to question authority, tradition, and oneself. It means valuing conversation over confrontation, depth over speed, and truth over comfort. In classrooms, workplaces, and public debate, the Socratic spirit can humanize the digital age, reminding us that understanding grows only through shared reasoning. 11. Plato's message for the 21st century. Standing at the intersection of antiquity and modernity, Plato addresses the core dilemmas of our era. In politics, he reminds us that freedom without virtue leads to chaos. Wisdom must guide power. In science and technology, he teaches that knowledge divorced from ethics endangers the world. In education, he calls for the cultivation of whole persons, not merely skilled workers. In personal life, he urges harmony of soul and self-knowledge as the path to happiness. In art and culture, he reveals beauty as a gateway to truth. In global ethics, he points toward the unity of humanity under the light of reason and the good. Each of these lessons stems from a single conviction, that reality is intelligible and that human beings, through reason and love, can participate in that intelligibility. To live according to this conviction is to live philosophically, to see beyond the shadows and dwell, however briefly, in the sunlight of truth. The timeless journey from shadows to light. Plato's life began in the turbulent democracy of classical Athens and ended in the quiet grove of the Academy. But his influence stretches across continents and centuries. He turned the philosophical gaze inward, from the movements of the stars to the movements of the soul, and outward again, toward the ideal of a just and beautiful world. His dialogues remain living conversations because they touch the perennial human struggle between ignorance and knowledge, desire and reason, appearance and reality. To ask, "Who is Plato?" is to encounter not merely a historical figure but a mirror of our own aspirations. He was the first great architect of thought to insist that the moral, intellectual, and spiritual dimensions of life form a single whole. His teachings invite us to climb, step by step, from confusion to clarity, from self-interest to justice, from the love of things to the love of truth. Applied to modern human life, Plato's philosophy becomes a guide to awakening. It teaches that wisdom begins with wonder, that the soul can be educated toward harmony, and that goodness, though unseen, is the most real thing in existence. Each generation must undertake this ascent anew, to turn from the flickering shadows of illusion toward the radiant form of the good. And so the journey continues. Every thoughtful person who pauses to question, every teacher who kindles understanding, every citizen who acts with integrity, walks the same path that Plato traced more than 2,000 years ago, the path from darkness to light.